Shayan and his partner had been counting down the days with a mix of excitement and relief. After months of searching, their very first home, a place they could truly call their own, was finally within reach. The apartment they had rented for years had been a temporary haven, but it came with its own set of challenges. Chief among them were the neighbors below, a family whose presence had always been difficult to ignore. From the very beginning, their habits had been irritating, ranging from loud footsteps to music that seemed to vibrate through the very bones of the building. It was one thing to live alongside ordinary neighbors, but these people seemed determined to make their lives unnecessarily chaotic. The first night in the apartment had been unforgettable, though not for pleasant reasons. The bass from the downstairs neighbors, music rattled the ceiling so violently that it felt like the walls themselves were pulsing in time with the beat. Shayan lay awake, listening to the low hum of subwoofers shaking the floorboards. It wasn't just music. It was an assault on every quiet expectation they had of their home. The rhythm of the night became oppressive, each thump echoing through the apartment with an almost physical force. Shayan's partner, ever patient, suggested that perhaps they should complain to management, but Shayan shook his head. They were only here for a short while, and the move to their new home was only days away, maybe a week or two at most. What was the point of creating tension that would last for only a fleeting period? As days passed, something remarkable happened. The noise began to taper off. The music, once so intrusive, became sporadic and faint. It was as though the downstairs neighbors, having initially tested the boundaries, had grown complacent or perhaps tired of their own disruptions. The apartment slowly returned to its quiet, predictable rhythm. Shayan's partner found solace in the evenings, carefully packing boxes with precision, labeling each one and stacking them neatly in preparation for the move. Every item packed was a step closer to leaving the old life behind, a tangible progression toward the new life that awaited. Shayan, meanwhile, immersed himself in coordinating the logistics of the move, meticulously arranging schedules for movers, confirming the new home's readiness, and ensuring that everything would be in place when the big day arrived. There was a sense of relief that permeated their days and nights. The constant tension, the anxiety of unpredictable noise and intrusive neighbors had momentarily lifted. For the first time in weeks, they could enjoy the peace of their home, focusing on the excitement of what lay ahead rather than the frustrations of what they were leaving behind. Even the simplest moments, a cup of tea by the window, the quiet rustle of packing paper, the soft thump of their own footsteps on the floor felt like small victories. It was a calm that felt almost fragile, as though they were holding their breath, savoring it while it lasted. Little did they know, the storm that had briefly subsided was only gathering strength, waiting for the right moment to return with a force that would challenge their patience in ways they had never imagined. Then, as if the building itself had conspired against them, the chaos returned with a vengeance. What had been a temporary lull in noise and tension vanished almost overnight. Doors slammed with a force that made the walls shudder, echoing through every room and jolting Shayan and his partner awake at odd hours. The bass from the downstairs neighbors' music was no longer a background irritation, it was a deliberate presence, filling every corner of the apartment, vibrating through furniture and floorboards, demanding attention. The subtle annoyance that had once been tolerable had transformed into a constant, pressing assault on their senses. Every thump, every low note felt like an intentional intrusion designed to make even the simplest task difficult or frustrating. At first they tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was a coincidence, they thought, or maybe the neighbors had simply returned to their usual habits without realizing the timing. But soon it became impossible to ignore the deliberate nature of the attacks. Gestures of open hostility, once rare, now became almost routine. They caught glimpses of arms raised in defiance, fingers pointed in anger, and faces twisted in expressions that made the air itself feel hostile. It was a silent communication of resentment, a reminder that every movement within their apartment was being observed, judged, and punished in real time. Shayan and his partner began to notice a pattern. The timing of the noise coincided with the couple's daily routines, walking from room to room, shifting boxes, while packing, even the soft creak of their steps, across the floor seemed to provoke new eruptions of sound and aggression from below. It became clear that the downstairs neighbors were not simply careless. They were calculating, orchestrating a campaign of discomfort designed to make the last days in the apartment unbearable. What had once been tolerable, the occasional annoyance of neighbors' habits, now felt like a deliberate siege. The realization settled in slowly, like a cold shadow stretching across the apartment. The downstairs neighbors had concluded that Shayan and his partner were leaving, and they had decided to make the final days intolerable as some sort of vindictive statement. It was a cruel kind of justice in their minds, turning every ordinary movement into a provocation. Every step, every box moved, every action was met with immediate retaliation, the boom of bass, the slam of doors, the glaring eyes through windows and balcony railings. Suspicion hardened into certainty when Shayan began to notice the constant surveillance. The neighbors' eyes followed them wherever they went, unblinking, unyielding, assessing every detail, calculating reactions. There was no confrontation, no words exchanged. Only the silent but unmistakable message that their presence was under siege. The apartment, once a place of temporary refuge, had become a battlefield of quiet endurance. The couple realized that they were being tested, and every day brought a new challenge: to endure the relentless noise, the deliberate disruptions, and the unnerving stares that made the walls of their home feel smaller, tighter, more suffocating. Each moment demanded vigilance and restraint, as though one misstep could trigger another wave of chaos. The air of quiet that had once comforted them now seemed fragile and fleeting. Every step through the apartment carried the weight of expectation, every action observed and judged. Shane and his partner understood that the final days of their stay would not pass unnoticed or unchallenged. The neighbors' campaign of deliberate disruption was in full force, and it would take patience, resilience, and careful strategy to survive until the day they finally left the apartment behind. As the days in the apartment dwindled, Shayan's mind began to shift from frustration to calculation. Living under the constant barrage of bass, slammed doors, and hostile glares had taken its toll, but it had also sharpened his awareness of the environment around them. One afternoon, while taking a short break from packing, his eyes wandered to the familiar lamppost outside, the one that had been broken for over a year. Its rusted, crooked frame leaned slightly to one side, the shattered glass at the top allowing only a faint trickle of light. Over the months, he had seen it neglected by the city, a constant reminder of the inattention and disrepair surrounding their building. But now, looking at it in relation to the neighbors below, a thought began to form, small at first, then gaining weight and clarity. The lamppost was perfectly positioned, aligned exactly with the height of the neighbor's bedroom window and balcony. It was almost as if it had been built with a purpose, a vantage point that would expose anyone on the balcony to full illumination. For months, it had been a simple inconvenience, an object of neglect that went unnoticed amid the chaos of moving in daily life. But Shayan now saw it as an opportunity, something that could be used not aggressively, not recklessly, but strategically to counter the weeks of harassment and intrusion. After submitting a formal repair request to the city, he learned that a worker would arrive in the coming days to fix it. The timing of the visit was precise, and Shayan knew it would coincide perfectly with their last days in the apartment. Suddenly, what had been a source of irritation became a potential instrument of quiet revenge. The neighbor's arrogance, their assumption that they could disrupt his life without consequence, was their vulnerability. Shayan's mind began to map the scenario carefully, the angles, the light, the timing. He imagined the bright glare of a freshly repaired lamppost cutting across the balcony at night, illuminating every movement below, stripping the neighbors of the subtle control they had thought they wielded over the space. Packing continued, but it was no longer routine. Every box, every piece of furniture, every carefully wrapped item was moved with purpose. Shayan placed certain objects near the windows facing the lamppost, not for convenience but for effect. The arrangement was almost ceremonial, each placement a calculated step in the unfolding plan. His partner watched, quietly trusting the strategy that had begun to take shape, their shared patience turning into a silent, unspoken collaboration. Days passed slowly, each one building tension, sharpening anticipation. Every thump of bass from below, every slam of a door, felt like a drumbeat leading up to the crescendo. Shayan and his partner maintained their calm, their movements deliberate, their patience unwavering. There were no confrontations, no shouting matches, no dramatic gestures, just observation, calculation, and preparation. In those final days, the apartment itself seemed to transform into a stage, the lamppost the spotlight, and Shayan and his partner the quiet orchestrators of an event that would unfold without a single word. The seed of revenge had been planted, subtle yet potent, and with every passing hour it grew stronger. It was a patient kind of justice, slow-burning and inevitable, a counterstrike that required no aggression, only timing, cleverness, and the knowledge that sometimes the most satisfying revenge is one that arrives silently, leaving those who provoked it utterly exposed. The morning was heavy with clouds, a dull gray that seemed to mirror the tension that had built over the past weeks. The city worker arrived promptly, carrying tools and equipment that clattered against the sidewalk with a metallic rhythm. The hum of machinery filled the quiet streets, a sound that contrasted sharply with the persistent, pulsating bass emanating from the apartment below. Shane and his partner had been waiting for this moment, their movements throughout the previous days carefully orchestrated to ensure that the final act of their revenge would unfold without interruption. Boxes and furniture had been shifted strategically, placed in positions that would maximize the effect of the newly repaired lamppost on the downstairs neighbor's balcony and bedroom window. Every decision had been deliberate, every placement intentional, all in preparation for a moment that required patience and precision. As the worker began the repair, the neighbor's music thumped even louder, almost as if they believed the noise could overpower the sounds of construction. Doors slammed, feet stomped, and shadows moved angrily behind curtains and blinds. Yet the rhythm of the repair persisted, unwavering and unstoppable. The workers' hands moved with steady efficiency, each adjustment of bolts and each swing of a wrench bringing the lamppost closer to full illumination. Shane and his partner observed quietly, their patience a shield against the chaos below. They did not react to the gestures, the loud noises, or the furious movements from the neighbor's apartment. Instead, they allowed the inevitability of the situation to unfold, knowing that the culmination of weeks of planning was arriving in real time. Finally, the moment came when the lamppost lit up. Its new glow was sharp and clear, cutting through the dull morning light and casting a bright beam across the balcony and bedroom window below. The neighbors, who had spent weeks asserting control through noise and intimidation, were confronted with an unexpected turn of events. The light struck directly into spaces they had assumed were private, forcing them into awkward, uncomfortable positions. Their view of the street and surroundings was disrupted, their sense of dominance evaporating in the face of something as simple and inevitable as municipal repair. Shayan and his partner moved with quiet grace, almost ceremoniously, as if participating in a ritual whose purpose was long overdue. They continued packing and adjusting boxes, each action deliberate, each movement underscoring the futility of the neighbors' attempts to intimidate them. Every slam of a door, every flicker of a hand from below, every burst of music was met with calm observation. The chaos that had once seemed overwhelming had lost its power. It was no longer a weapon, only background noise to a carefully orchestrated moment of poetic justice. From their vantage point, the couple could see the expressions of irritation and discomfort on the neighbors' faces. There was no shouting, no confrontation, only a silent acknowledgement that the balance of power had shifted. The lamppost, a simple fixture of city infrastructure, had become a tool of subtle retribution, illuminating what the neighbors had never considered, the consequences of their own arrogance. Shane and his partner knew the victory required no words, no displays of anger. It was quiet, calculated, and absolute. In that moment, the culmination of patience, strategy, and timing became tangible, a reminder that sometimes the most effective acts of justice are those that arrive without fanfare, but leave an unmistakable mark. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in muted shades of orange and purple, the chaos that had dominated the apartment for weeks had finally run its course. The lamppost outside stood tall and bright, its repaired light cutting sharply through the evening gloom. illuminating the balcony and bedroom window of the downstairs neighbors with a stark, unyielding glow. Where they had once attempted to assert dominance through noise and intimidation, their control had been quietly dismantled, replaced by a presence that was unassailable yet subtle. Shayan and his partner moved through the apartment with a sense of calm accomplishment, loading the final boxes into the truck, stacking them with precision, and ensuring that every item was accounted for. Each box carried with it a small victory, a tangible reminder that their patience and careful planning had not been in vain. The apartment, once filled with tension and hostility, now felt strangely empty and serene. Every wall, every corner, echoed only with the faint traces of their activity, the rhythm of packing and preparation that had carried them through weeks of frustration. The bass music from below still throbbed faintly, a ghost of the chaos that had plagued them, but it no longer had any power over their mood or their plans. The noise, once overwhelming, was now simply background, a reminder of battles already won. Shayan and his partner moved with a deliberate grace, their calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the frantic energy that had defined the neighbors' final days in the apartment. They knew the true victory lay not in confrontation, but in the careful orchestration of circumstances, in the patient observation and subtle manipulation that had turned an ordinary municipal repair into a quiet act of retribution. As the truck rumbled to life and pulled away from the building, the couple felt a profound sense of release. The weeks of tension, of sleepless nights and constant vigilance began to evaporate with every mile. Their destination was not just a new home, but a new chapter, a space untainted by the hostility that had shadowed their previous apartment. With each passing street and familiar landmark left behind, the weight of the past weeks lifted, replaced by the lightness of accomplishment and the quiet satisfaction of justice served without aggression or confrontation. Upon arriving at their new home, the sense of triumph was tangible. The move itself had been executed flawlessly, but the true victory was intangible, a combination of timing, strategy, and patience that had allowed them to reclaim a sense of control in the final days. The neighbors' attempts to torment them had been nullified, not through argument or retaliation, but through a single, perfectly timed act that required foresight and observation rather than confrontation. Shayan and his partner could finally breathe, their shared glance reflecting relief, pride, and the quiet thrill of having turned the tables without uttering a word. In the end, the story was about more than bass, slammed doors, or gestures of hostility. It was a testament to patience, to the power of strategy and subtlety, and to the understanding that true triumph often comes from observing the world carefully, exploiting opportunities when they appear, and walking away unshaken, leaving chaos behind to reveal its own consequences. The couple had done more than move. They had rewritten the final chapter of their story, proving that calm intelligence and careful planning could deliver a victory far more satisfying than confrontation ever could.